What was the Rebbe's view regarding secular studies? Did it not entail some form of elementary basics for students over 9 or 11? If so, why then do institutions like Paltiel not teach any secular whatsoever? I can't believe that the Rebbe wanted to cripple generations of children by not giving them any foundation whatsoever in the basic secular fields. Parenthesis, especially when the Rebbe himself was highly knowledgeable in all subjects, end of parenthesis. Not everyone is cut out to be a shliach or a teacher, parenthesis, and as they have no other option, they would obviously be very poor at their perpetuating the cycle over again, and this time with poor, worse teachers at the helm, end of parenthesis. You might argue that people can make an income, but I'm not talking about moving boxes from shelf to shelf, but having a proper professional career. You may also counter that one can be an interpreter, but they are few and far between. One can start studying for a low degree when they get married, but it is so much more difficult when needing to start with the ABCs, as the basics are just not there. And lastly, as successful as the shluchim are at their jobs, it is in spite of the ignorance, parenthesis, as it is made up with enthusiasm and warmth, end of parenthesis, and definitely not because of it. There are many, many disenfranchised young men who have to resort to taking on menial jobs because of their non-existent secular education. Many have large families and insufficient income. Moreover, they are held ransom by the very institutions, parenthesis, that encourage the very ignorance in secular matters, consequently leading to poverty, etc., end of parenthesis, by needing to pay thousands of dollars in tuition when those very institutions do not give them the basics to make that sort of income. Parenthesis, they're actually discouraged to do so and are frowned upon if they were to seek any form of education that is not al taras הקודש, end of parenthesis. Ironically, it is those that have chosen a different path or come from different paths that can afford this education and get preference to where they can send their children. The irony is not lost on anybody involved. Please give us truthful answers, truthful status on the Rebbe's real opinion on this matter, parenthesis, and how he dealt with all the issues mentioned above, end of parenthesis. As it's something that is very close to heart, and of course, needless to say, it is very painful to many. Thank you for your honesty. This is a long question with many, many, many points. I am going to try my best to address each point. I'm not going to answer each point. I'm going to try and address each point. But there are two things that need to be said up front that are both very, very important. The first, and probably the single most important thing that I could say, is this. Every parent has responsibility for his or her children. Period. When I was growing up, there was a group of boys who learned to know the Torah, and there was a group of boys who learned to know Torah and at a certain point went to Lubavitch. And at least my understanding was, although I may have had a childish idea, because this were the parents who were concerned about limudei chol, and when the children reached the age of 9 or 11, which was the ages that the Rebbe gave, 9 or 11, not to start limudei chol before, they moved their children from Torah to Lubavitch, and they learned limudei chol. They got high school diplomas in many cases. This was a choice that parents made. And this is a choice that every parent has to make. I feel not so much from the tone of this letter, but from many people, that they feel like they're hostages. No one is being held hostage. No one is being held hostage in Lubavitch. You don't have to send the children to Lubavitcher schools. You don't have to be a Lubavitcher. If a person is a Lubavitcher, it's because they value the Rebbe and the Rebbe's values. They've bought in. They've signed. They've agreed to the principles. The Rebbe has a certain philosophy of life. You don't have to agree with the Rebbe's philosophy. You can agree with the Rebbe's philosophy and not follow it. You can agree to the Rebbe's philosophy and follow it in part. But you can't feel like you have no control over your life because of the Rebbe. It's not fair to the Rebbe. It's not fair to the Rebbe. It's not fair to you. If a person is a Lubavitcher, and his feeling as a Lubavitcher is that being a Lubavitcher puts him in a position where he feels like his life is out of control, it's just plain wrong. It's not wrong because he doesn't have to be a Lubavitcher. He's plain wrong because the Rebbe never took anybody's free will away. Let's be honest. Who's 100% Lubavitch? Who is Lubavitch exactly as the Rebbe wants? Each one of us, on some level, emphasizes the things that we think are important, and all of us need to improve. When we're raising our children, we're responsible for our children, nobody else. So I'm making two statements about this initial point. Point number one. If you are worried about your children's parnasa enough, that in your mind, limud echol, from whatever age, is so critical that they need to get it, do it for them. However you do it for them, inside the school, outside the school, don't blame the school. The schools are doing what the schools are doing. Whether the schools are right or wrong is a different point. You're a parent. You have children. Take care of them. Raise them. Just like you teach your children how to brush their teeth and throw out the garbage, you can teach them how to be human beings. It's part of your job. If this is what you feel like you should do it. Now, am I agreeing or disagreeing? It doesn't matter what I think. The only thing that I'm saying, and this I'm going to tell you exactly how I think, is the feeling that parents have, that they have no control of the upbringing of their children, is a huge mistake. The worst thing a parent can do to his child is not raise him or her. If you feel that the right way to raise your children is with a limited amount of limud echol, or whatever you feel, do it. And it's not about limud echol, it's about parenting. It's about you are responsible for your children. And you have to make decisions for your children. Now, you're a Lubavitcher. But you're a Lubavitcher with a brain. And you have to use your own judgment. There's more than one school in Lubavitch. There's more than one option in Lubavitch. You have choices. And I'm not just saying this because I'm trying to deflect the question. I'm saying this because I'm trying to put a perspective on this question. If you send your child to a school with no limud echol, that's your choice. It's not your prison. It isn't. It's your choice. You have choices. You have many choices. You have other schools, and you also have the option of giving them after school limud echol. You also have the option, I know this is a terrible thing to say, but it's true. You can send them outside Lubavitch. Now, I'm not telling you what I think about these things, but I am telling you that I think this, that if you're a parent and you don't have responsibility for your children in your own judgment, that's a bigger crime than anything else. You have to raise your kids as you think you should. Now, you're a Lubavitcher, and you have a Rebbe, and you're asking me what the Rebbe holds and what the Rebbe thinks, and I'm going to get to that. But first of all, if you choose to be a Lubavitcher when it comes to chinuch and raise the kids the Rebbe wants, that's not the school's fault, that's not the Rebbe's fault, it's your choice. And you make this choice because of its value, not because you feel like you're stuck. You make your choice because you agree with it, because it sounds right and correct to you. And again, I'm not saying this to push the blame back. I'm saying this because worse than giving a child limud echol or not giving a child limud echol is not giving the child anything. And as a parent, you give your child your values, your philosophy of life, whatever it is. And hopefully that philosophy is consistent with the Rebbe's philosophy, hopefully more rather than less. But this is how you have to parent. You have to parent from strength. This is what I believe. When you go out on dates and you meet a boy or a girl and you talk about the children you're going to raise and how you're going to raise them. This is one of the discussions that comes up. And it's a deliberate choice. And it's not a deliberate choice to not have a choice. It's a deliberate choice to choose this for the value that this has. So I feel this way very, very strongly. And again, I'm not saying this to deflect the question. I'm saying this to empower parents. Whatever choice you make, it has to be yours. You're your children's advocate. You're your children's guardian. You're your children's primary caretaker and primary educator. Embrace that responsibility. Use your mind. Talk to people. Talk to your husband. Talk to your wife. Come up with a plan of action that you think will serve your children the best in a way that you feel like you are doing what your children need you to do for them. And go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it. Your children will be better off in the end, whatever choices you make, even if they're not the most Hasidic choice, if you parent proactively, than if you make very Hasidic choices, but you make them from a place of resignation, of you're not in control. This is my first point. And my second point is this. There's a simple adage in the Rebbe's thinking. And that is that education is not about parnasa, period. Cheder and yeshiva is not about parnasa. It's not. It's about making Jews. That's how it was in the old country, and that's how it is now. That's how the Rebbe thinks of it. Parnasa is a reality that's incredibly important and incredibly serious. And I think more than anything else, it keeps more people worried than people worry about health, than people worried about shidduchim, people worry about Yiddishkeit, even though of all the things I just listed, Parnasa is the least important, but the fact of life is people worry about Parnasa more than anything else. But the Rebbe never saw chinuch as a Parnasa consideration. The American public school, I don't even think the American public school originally was about making a living. It was about educating people. They should be intelligent, they should be informed, they should be able to read and write, they should be able to dialogue, engage in discussion on a higher and more intelligent level. Chinuch, yeshiva education is not about preparing people for making a living. It is about preparing people for life. But life is Yiddishkeit. Life is our values. Life is our ability to get married and stay married. Life out is about dedicating ourselves to our children. Life is about giving to other people. Life is about taking on the mature, responsible things that too many adults in our civilization couldn't be bothered with because they would like to have entertainment in their life. And we teach our children our values so they shouldn't follow those people and that way of life, and they should choose this way of life. And that's the foundation of the Rebbe's approach of Taras HaKodesh. When the Rebbe spoke that Sicha, Simchas Teda Tafshin Tezvav, which is printed, the Manichim, the transcribers write that they don't have all the words that Rebbe said, but that the Rebbe used incredibly severe and critical language. And the essence of the Rebbe's position was that for 3,000 years, Jews educated children. The public school educational system is how old? 150 years old? Before that, most people were totally illiterate, except for the very rich, who paid for their children's education privately. Jews always educated their children, always. And the education was cheder, and cheder was Yiddishkeit, period, the end. Many of kids in Poland spoke Polish with an accent. They spoke Russia with an accent because they were raised to be Yiddish kinder. And in those countries, there was anti-Semitism and there was real poverty. Not the kind of poverty that you describe in this paper, but real poverty. And the Rebbe's objection was, we come to a country which is not only free, but incredibly kind, historically kind to the Jewish people. And we just accepted, in all schools, that half a day has to be choil, without even questioning it. It bothered the Rebbe that nobody even said, this is not how we educate kids. It never was. It never was. Education was never about Parnasa. It wasn't. It was about Yiddishkeit, which is about Torah. It was about Torah. And that's what concerned the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said he wants parents to at least delay giving their children secular education until the age of 9 or 11. The Rebbe said if we up to him, he would say higher ages. He's just afraid to say it because he doesn't want to offend people. And that's as much as I'm going to say in this segment, and I'll continue Mitzvah Hashem in the next. This is my second segment on the question of the Rebbe and Limudei Chol. What is the Rebbe's view regarding secular studies? The answer to that question, without going any further, is that it's a tool. It's never a self-identity. A Jew's identity is Torah. When a person studies secular knowledge, and he enjoys it more than he enjoys Gemara, and Chassidus, and Halacha, and Tanakh, and he intellectually defines himself by it to the Rebbe, that's a Chilul Hashem. Now that may be a little bit of a strong expression, but it's not a very strong, not too strong an expression. Because the Rebbe is a Chassidic Rebbe, who teaches Chassidic values, and the Chassidic values are Torah Tmima. The Chassidic values are not Torah Im Derech Eretz, and they're certainly not Torah Umada. We don't have a philosophy of what's called open-mindedness, where a part of being an intellectual is learning anything but Torah. Secular studies are taught and learned as a kadam lachtachba, as a tool to make a parnasa. And that's the attitude that we have towards them, and that's the way we invest in them. And as parents, we have to create an environment in our home where that value is communicated. In other words, if we personally value chokhmas chitzonius, secular studies, intellectually, in the kind of way that we communicate to our children that this is a priority, they're going to value it as well. And it's not a Hasidic value. It's not a Hasidic value. It's a secular value. It's a worldly value. And in the modern Orthodox philosophy holds that it's a priority. They hold that it's a part of being a Yid. But this is Hasidus. And Hasidus disagrees with that categorically. Secular studies are a means to an end. They're never a self-definition. I met a man many years ago who was a doctor in an emergency room, which makes him a very good doctor, because he's on his feet and he has to constantly think creatively, as emergency room doctors need to be. And he said to me, I practice medicine, but I'm not a doctor. So I said to him, what do you mean you didn't go to medical school? He said, no, I went to medical school and I graduated, but I don't consider it an honorable profession. Learning Daf Yomi, I consider honorable. Practicing medicine is what I do. Now, having said that, I want to qualify that a little bit. We're parents and we have children. It's our duty as parents and as Hasidim to create a direction for our children to go in and to show them by example mostly, but also by what we tell them, what philosophy of life you want them to pursue, which is a Hasidic philosophy of life. If our children show an interest in Chochmas Chitzenius, of course, it depends on the field. Some fields of Chochmas Chitzenius are not allowed to be studied because they're kfira, particularly when it deals with Avodah Zarah directly. Like comparative religion is probably the worst thing a boy or girl should study, specifically when they're studying what they call Bible criticism, where they're actually criticizing Torah. It's the worst. If you have a child that's interested in mathematics or physics and chemistry by themselves, or history, you have to be very careful about shutting them down. Meaning, as much as I'm saying that the Rebbe's attitude towards secular studies is that we don't define ourselves by it. We define ourselves only by Torah, only by Chassidus. The Jewish people are defined by the Torah. It says in Gemara and it's brought in Halachim that if a person has completed the whole Torah and he says, now that I've studied the whole Torah, I want to go study other Chochmas, the Torah says you're not allowed to do it. This is brought to Rabbi in Hilchas Talmud Torah. A Jew's whole identity is Torah. That's the philosophy of Chassidus. That is the philosophy of Chassidus. The philosophy of Torah, the philosophy of Chassidus, and the philosophy of the Rebbe. But if a child shows an acute interest, you have to be careful about saying no. In other words, you must appreciate the idea that Chochmas Chitzenius, by and large, although not entirely, is Klippas Noiga. It's not a sin. And if children show an interest, it's not necessarily correct to absolutely shut them down and stop them and not allow them. Of all the things a child can get into, which is, quote, wrong, is the least of the wrongs. But we as parents who are communicating to our children the Rebbe's values is that Chochmas Chitzenius is Klippa. And you study it because you need it when you need it. And as it says in Tanya chapter 8, that Chochmas Chitzenius Metama HaMoyach, it contaminates the mind, which in a way is worse than what's Metames HaLev, that contaminates the heart. As we see, in fact, sometimes a child gets involved in Chochmas Chitzenius, and he gets so enthralled with it that it takes over his gishmak, takes over his joy in Torah, and that would be a calamity, that would be a terrible thing. But if the child shows an interest in those studies, I think you have to be very careful about stopping them, because it's not an Aveda, and sometimes stopping them will turn out to be a huge Aveda. But as parents, the values we communicate to our children, the Rebbe's values, is that Chochmas Chitzenius, secular studies, is never an end in itself, it's a means to an end. The only thing we study that's an end in itself is Torah. In the early 60s, there's actually a sikha, you can audio tape where you can hear the Rebbe talking about it, that Yeshiva University, YU, honored some of their students who had won a Shakespeare competition. I think it was a national competition, and some of the students in Yeshiva University did very, very well in that competition in literature. And of course, Yeshiva University has the philosophy of Torah Mada, Torah and other knowledge, which is not the Hasidic philosophy. And the Rebbe really went off, protesting, how come when a person finishes Shas or finishes a Masechta, we don't make such a big deal out of him. When a person it wins an award for Shakespeare, we make such a big deal. And the Rebbe was talking to YU. He was talking to a culture and a philosophy that's not a Hasidic culture and a philosophy that principally believes in Torah Umada, and he was protesting the fact that they gave primacy to Shakespeare over Torah. In our culture and in our philosophy, which means the Rebbe's Torah and the Rebbe's philosophy, secular subject is a mean to an end. Period. This is my third segment on the question of secular subjects and children, and I'm just going to read the part that I'm planning to address. Did it not entail some form of elementary basics for students over the ages of 9 and 11? That means learning secular subjects, and if so, why then do institutions like Ola Teda not teach any secular whatsoever? The answer to this question is this. The Rebbe asked that people delay introducing their children to Chochmas Chitzenius till the age of 9 or the age of 11, and that after that, it's better than if they do it sooner, meaning that their formative years, the most important years, the most impressionable years of a child's life, should be dedicated entirely to Kodesh, and we should delay Chol till the ages of 9 or 11. And as I mentioned in my first segment, there were many parents who put their children in a school where they taught only Kodesh till that age, and after that age, they moved them to another Lubavitcher school where they taught secular subjects. So that's the Rebbe's request. Now, Ola Teda is a separate issue. Ola Teda is a school that the Rebbe wanted, and he wanted it to be entirely Al Tadas HaKodesh. In other words, there are two separate questions. One question is, what was the Rebbe's view? If you're a Lubavitcher Chassid and a follower of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and you're concerned with your children's parnasa, and you feel with them to make a living, they have to learn Limudei Chol as children, they can't make it up as adults, they have to learn at the age of 9 or 11, the Rebbe is asking to delay. Ola Teda is a separate issue. Ola Teda is a school that's entirely Al Tadas HaKodesh because the Rebbe wanted a school entirely Al Tadas HaKodesh. And the Rebbe's investment in Ola Teda, for those who are familiar, and a lot of this is well known, was extraordinary. For many years, they've actually paid the deficit of Ola Teda out of the budget of Merkez. Just paid whatever Rabbi Chol was missing, the Rebbe paid. And then the Rebbe made the partnership between Rabbi Chol, Olav HaSholem, and Rabbi David Deitch, Olav HaSholem Zachreinam Levracha, to sustain Ola Teda. And of course, there's some very interesting stories. That one of them is that when Rabbi Chol made a high school, made a masifta, that Ashag got upset. And he came to Rabbi Chol and he said the Rebbe wanted a school for children Al Tadas HaKodesh, but they're past the age of 9, they're past the age of 11. You don't need to have a masifta, let the boys come in Lubavitch, because Lubavitcher school was the older school. And Rabbi Chol indicated that the Rebbe wanted Al Teda masifta, which means Kodesh only. So the Rashag said to Machol, since this is not part of the Rebbe's mandate of the age of 9 or 11, he's going to take him to a Din Torah. He's going to sue him for making a competitive school in a time when in Lubavitch they couldn't afford 2 schools. Today we wish we had more. We need more schools. There's no question about it, which is a separate discussion. So Machol asked the Rebbe what to do. And the Rebbe told Machol, tell the Rashag that he should sue the Balabas of Ola Teda. He should sue the owner of Ola Teda, which meant he should sue the Rebbe himself, because the Rebbe saw himself as the Balabais of Ola Teda. The Rebbe wanted a Moisid Al Tadas HaKodesh. And even people in Ola Teda would say to the Rebbe, why do you need competition? Lubavitcher Yeshiva existed from the 40s. And the Rebbe said, was artist ich will have my Moisid. I want to have an institution that's mine. And the Rebbe wanted a Moisid which is Tadas HaKodesh. It's interesting and ironic. It really is interesting and most ironic that a Rebbe who was so in the world and so pluralistic in his thinking in terms of spreading Yiddishkeit, at the same time, when it came to Anash, when it came to Lubavitcher Hasidim, was incredibly dogmatic. He wanted Lubavitcher boys, and some will say even Lubavitcher girls, to be raised in America where the only thing they learn as children, and even the adolescents, should be Toher and Kodesh, should be Yiddishkeit. Parnasa is something that you learn when you need it, and when you. The Rebbe's philosophy, and I'll talk about this in a later segment, is you study for Parnasa when you need Parnasa. And when you're a yeshiva bacher or a yeshiva girl, you dedicate yourself entirely to Torah. This is what the Rebbe wanted. This is what the Rebbe wanted. And he embraced Ola Teda. He considered Ola Teda his own. because it represented this mandate. And it reflects what it means, a tzaddik. You think you understand the Rebbe because of his understanding of the world and his using worldly method and technology and technique and technology for the spreading of Yiddishkeit. You're talking about a person who's a tzaddik gomer, who's connected to Hashem on a level that's unimaginable. And he sees the world through that prism. And he has many duties. He has a duty to the world, he has a duty to the from world, he has a duty to his Hasidim. And to the Hasidim who would listen to him, he said, I want my children to be raised al Taras HaKodesh. So the answer to your question is that Ola Teda is not consistent with the ages of 9 and 11. 9 and 11 was a request. If you're a Lubavitcher, please delay giving your children Mudechol till that age. And of course, as I mentioned to my first segment, there is two basic things you as a parent can do. Number one, you can put them in a school where there is Limudei Chol. And number two, what a lot of parents are doing is they're putting them in after-school programs where they're learning Limudei Chol and learning Limudei Chol quite well. Perhaps better than they would in a normal classroom. And when they become grown-ups, they have the skills that they need in reading and writing and math and whatever else that they would need to help them advance in their parnasa. But that's one issue. Ola Teda is a unique creation. Ola Teda is the Rebbe's school. It carries the Rebbe's name. And this may sound like a very not nice thing to say, but this is the truth. It's not the Frierdiker Rebbe's, it's not the Rebbe Rashab, it's the Rebbe's. And the Rebbe wanted one Moised that he could call his, which is al Taras HaKodesh. And sending a child to Ola Teda is a sacrifice because the children are getting no Limudei Chol. And you're doing it for two reasons. Number one, because you believe in the value of Taras HaKodesh. And number two, perhaps even more importantly, you want your child to learn in the school, which is our Rebbe's, which is the Rebbe's Moised. But as I explained in my first segment, you got to do it with your eyes open. You have to embrace it and not resent it. If you're going to resent it, then really don't do it. The Rebbe wouldn't want you to do it. This is my fourth segment on the question of Limudei Chol, and again, I'm only reading the part of the question that I'm going to address. I can't believe that the Rebbe wanted to cripple generations of children by not giving them any foundation whatsoever in the basic secular field, especially when the Rebbe himself was highly knowledgeable in all subjects. I'm going to address this backward. Let's talk about the Rebbe. And now we're in an area, first of all, which is emotional. Whoever's writing this has certain feelings, and I also have certain feelings. And second of all, I'm not getting into the prove-it game. I'm just telling you how I see it. The Rebbe's knowledge of secular subject is not because he was a pluralist. It's not because he was a cosmopolitan person. Not because he was open-minded. It's because he needed it to do his job. The Rebbe is a servant of God, period, the end, full stop. We forget how holy the Rebbe is. We forget how little we have in common with the Rebbe's personal life and personal avodas Hashem. I tell my students all the time, the Rebbe made being a Rebbe look so easy. He made being a Rebbe look so easy. It almost seemed like anybody could do it. It's an impossible task, the task that the Rebbe had. His responsibilities and his giving, his generosity, and the number of questions he had to answer, the number of people he was involved with, and the number of life and death situations that he dealt with on a daily basis. It's unbelievable. And the strength for that all came from one thing, his connection to God. The Rebbe is a servant of God. And everything he does is in lieu of that service. Whatever the Rebbe learned in Chochmas Chitzenius was helping him serve the Eibishter. Like the Rebbe brings in the letter that he wrote to Alter Hilvitz, which is printed in the Igris. If you want to have the line and page number, I can send it to you, but it's also printed in the Sofas of the Kutas Sichas Chelik Yud, where he talks about the Hetedim for learning Chochmas Chitzenius. There's a Hetedim for learning secular subjects. I think it actually translated into English in the book Mind Over Matter. And the Rebbe brings 5 or 6 justifications for studying Limudei Chol, beginning with Parnasa, and continuing with not having bad thoughts in a bathroom, and continuing with knowing you should be able to make a sukkah and Kiddush HaChodesh and so on. And the Rebbe lists 5 Hetedim to study Limudei Chol, and then he brings the 6th. And the 6th is what's written in the end of Tanya chapter 8. That explains why the Rambam and the Ramban, Maimonides and Nachmanides, engaged in these subjects. And what the Rebbe is writing to Alter Hilvitz, who was an incredibly great Gaon, but he was also very well educated in secular, is that for Gedolim like the Rambam and the Ramban, their learning of secular subjects was for the sake of elevating the secular subjects themselves, meaning they don't need a heter. They're not learning it because they're going to use it as a tool. Their involvement in secular subjects is because of who they were. And it's an exclusive category. You have to be a Rambam or a Ramban to learn Chochmas Chitzenius in that level. And the Rebbe is in that category. To compare the Rebbe's knowledge of Chochmas Chitzenius to ours is not understanding who the Rebbe is. Or to say it different, to compare the Rebbe's interest in Chochmas Chitzenius to our interest in Chochmas Chitzenius is really underappreciating who the Rebbe is. The Rebbe is a man who all he cared about was serving Hashem. And his involvement in learning Chochmas Chitzenius was a part of that service. That's it. That's it. So you cannot draw any parallel between the Rebbe's learning Chochmas Chitzenius, secular subjects, and the Rebbe's philosophy towards our learning secular subjects, because his learning secular subject is holy and in the service of Hashem, both in terms of how he's going to use it to spread Yiddishkeit, as well as in terms of his ability to bring holiness into things that are not holy. But neither of those are our business. Now, in terms of the first part of what you wrote, I can't believe the Rebbe wanted to cripple generations of children. How would the Rebbe respond to those words? Cripple generations of children. There's many talks of the Rebbe about this, both about secular learning of children as well as going to college. The Rebbe really fought a war against college, which if you look in Lubavitch today, it's almost forgotten. You wouldn't know that the Rebbe objected. And a lot of people either say the Rebbe didn't mean us, or they don't understand the Rebbe's objection, or the Rebbe wasn't so opposed. The Rebbe was vehemently opposed. If you would ask the question, Rebbe, why are you crippling me? And the Rebbe would answer you, I think teaching your children Chochmas Chitzenius is crippling them. You want to have a healthy child, give him Yiddishkeit. We have a blind spot, and I understand the blind spot, but it is a blind spot. The blind spot is that Parnasa consumes us more than anything else. I mentioned it in my first segment. We, as young people, young adults, worry about Parnasa. As parents, worry about Parnasa. But health, you can't buy with all the money in the world. Shalom Bayis, you can't buy with all the money in the world. Nachas, you can't buy with all the money in the world. And Yiddish and Hasidish and Nachas, you certainly can't buy with all the money in the world. But for some reason, most people, the young adults themselves and their parents, assume that those things are going to work out. The only thing that we think is not going to work out is Parnasa. And on balance, it's the least important. The Rebbe sat in his room and received our letters. Not so much for the tzaras of Parnasa, it's for tzaras of not having children or having sick children, chas v'sholem. And of course, just to throw this in parenthetically, the Rebbe would speak a lot about the relationship between healthy children and tzaras HaMishpacha, which is a Yiddishkeit value. And people who don't have shalom bayis, and people who don't have the most important things in life. And the Rebbe is reacting to the world as he sees it. And he has a much more objective view of the world than we do, because he hears what's really on people's minds. But somehow, our nature is that when things are not pressing against the nerve, the thing that overwhelmingly bothers us is how to make a living. And we worry about this so much that we define ourselves and we define our children's education by Parnasa, and we call that making them healthy. We call that making them know how to live. And we call lacking those skills cripple. The Rebbe would simply categorically oppose the argument. He would say, you want healthy children? Teach them Torah, teach them Yiddishkeit, teach them Hasidus. But teach them. Don't let them go through school casually where they learn little and everything just runs off them like water runs off a water bird. Give them an appreciation for Yiddishkeit, for Torah, for Hasidus. Make sure that they learn in school and that they're inspired in school. That's how you create healthy children. That's how you create children who are not crippled. I think that's how the Rebbe would answer this question. The Rebbe would say, he wouldn't answer, I'm crippling your children because of this reason. He would say that this cripples children. If you want healthy children, you'll teach them to be Jewish. This is my fifth segment on the question that I was asked about the Rebbe's philosophy in Chochmas Chitzenius. And as I said, I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going to read the part that I'm going to talk to. Not everyone is cut out to be a shliach or a teacher. And as they have no other option, they would obviously be very poor at their jobs, perpetuating the cycle all over again, and this time with poor, worse teachers at the helm. A person should not go into chinuch because he doesn't have a way of making a living. That's not fair to the children, and it's not fair to him. People go into chinuch because it's a sacred calling. They go into chinuch for the same reason they go on shlichus. It's a sacred calling. From what I understand, and that's all I can give you, is my understanding and my opinion. The Rebbe's philosophy is that a single boy and a single girl should be learning Torah. And they should worry about parnasa when parnasa becomes a need. Now this is very, very un-American. Because in America, from the moment you're born, you're thinking about your career. And everything you do from your childhood through your adolescence to young adulthood is going in the direction of that career and that profession and that specialty. The Rebbe's philosophy is that if and when a person needs to make a living, he'll figure out how. The practical reality of it is this. Young couples get married, boys and girls get married, and they have financial burden. But the financial burdens are relatively small. I believe the Rebbe would say to the average boy and girl, there are exceptions, but the average boy and girl, when you need a parnasa, get one. You want to become a professional, you need an education, do that after you're married. Most professions don't take that many years. It takes 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or even 5 or 6 years. And you're learning your skill while under the burden of parnasa. It's never been easier. In America today, because of student loans and the fact that it's really relatively easy to get into school, people who choose to be professionals can do that successfully if they sit in yeshiva and learn till the chasana and even do a year of koilo. I think that's the Rebbe's approach. The idea of a cycle of poverty because kids get married and they're stuck is just plain not true. Our kids get married and many of them go and look for careers. A lot of them go into business. Some of them become professionals. I think it's becoming clearer and clearer as every year passes that a college education and making a lot of money are not corollaries. People make much money, much more money in all kinds of different ways. I appreciate that there's a select group of people who are very ambitious and very gifted, and then there are people who are less ambitious and less gifted and they need more education. But it's not impossible for a boy or a girl to get married and to think about parnasa after their marriage, so that they're growing up, their education is a religious education and a Jewish education, which is based on faith and Hasidus. There is no reason for a boy or girl to get married and to be stuck in a cycle and he becomes a teacher because he can't find another way to make a living. It's just not true. And if a person gets married and he's stuck, that stuckness is not due to the fact that they don't have options. It's because they're afraid. And that fear of going out into the world and taking risks and making decisions and figuring out how to borrow and live for the first few years until your parnasa is established has nothing to do with not getting sexual education. It's a psychological thing. It's not a business thing. And you're not going to fix that with all the secular education in the world. There are people in this world who study for years and years and years and years, and they don't know how to make a living. A boy, I believe that the Rebbe would say to a boy who doesn't want to go on shlichus or can't go on shlichus, get married. When you need parnasa, you'll go and figure out what you're going to do, and it'll be hard for a few years. But as I say to my students all the time, if you want to do what the Rebbe wants, that's what you'll do. He says you can do whatever you want. You don't have to listen to the Rebbe. Unfortunately, too many of our boys and girls are not. But if you want to do what the Rebbe wants, wait till you get married. After your wedding, you'll go and do these things. The Eibishter will help you. You'll learn whatever skill, and you'll do it successfully. I know people who are doctors who did that, which is extraordinarily difficult because medical school is so many years. They asked the Rebbe, and they waited. They got the Rebbe's permission, whether it was reluctant or whatever the system of the communication between them and the Rebbe was. They learned in yeshiva. Some of them even went to koilo, and then they figured out how to make ends meet. And they put themselves through medical school and they became doctors. and they listen to the Rebbe. They listen to the Rebbe. And that's a good idea. It's a good idea to listen to the Rebbe. You know, to put it in very gross words, teifa food is cheaper than kosher food. We want to eat kosher food. We're not stuck with kosher food. Not putting on tefillin is cheaper than putting on tefillin. We want to put on tefillin. And the same is true in the Hasidic value system. Nobody should become a teacher because they can't make a living. You become a teacher because it's a holy calling. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 33 years. It's not worth it. It's one of the hardest and most thankless professions in Lubavitch and perhaps in the world. It's incredibly difficult to do. To be a teacher and you don't believe in it, you're not going to succeed. It's not sustainable. And most people who are in chinuch, certainly today, are in chinuch out of strength, not out of weakness. I'll read the next paragraph because I don't know if there's anything more for me to say on it. You might argue that people can make an income, but I'm not talking about moving boxes from shelf to shelf, but having a proper professional career. You may also counter that one can be an interpreter, but they're few and far between. One can start studying for a law degree after marriage, but it is so much more difficult when needing to start with the ABCs as the basics are just not there. I said what I had to say on this subject, but in terms of the basics and ABCs not being there, I just want to remind you, as parents, after 9, after 11, you can give your child ABCs. It doesn't have to be in yeshiva. You can get them a tutor. There's a lot of programs after school where a child can learn how to read and write. I'm not thinking children should not know how to read and write English. But it's not what chinuch is. It's something that you need to know, but it's not chinuch. Chinuch is Yiddishkeit. But I want to say something most important, which is unfortunately very necessary to say specifically in Lubavitch. The number one reason, on a practical level, that boys and girls go to school is to learn Torah. It's not to be inspired. It's not to hear nice stories. It's not to sing the gunim. It's to learn Torah. And I know as a teacher, the percentage of boys and girls who, for whatever reasons, don't value learning, feel like they cannot learn, and they plain simple don't learn. Now, to some extent, this is on the schools, and to some extent, this is on the parents. And I'm not sure who carries more of the burden, but there's plenty to share. As parents, I promise you, I give you a guarantee, if you give your children a love of learning, and they don't learn one word of the B'dichol, but they sit and learn Gemara Basmada, they sit and learn Chassidus with a depth and with an attentiveness, they learn Halacha with an exactitude and a precision, they'll have no difficulty learning anything. When a kid comes out of yeshiva, if he learned Torah, he can do anything in the world. Because there's simply no subject more difficult than Gemara. There's simply no subject more edel, more refined, more sensitive, more theoretical than Chassidus. The problem isn't that the kids are coming out of school uneducated. Too many kids come out of school, they didn't learn Torah. They didn't use their minds. And the answer to that is not that they should learn ABCs and learn Limudei Chol. The answer is that they should use their years in yeshiva learning Torah. If you develop your mind as a student of Torah and you choose to become a professional rather than a businessman, you have the brain power to do anything you want. It's not going to give you the social skills. It's not going to make you socially adept at rubbing shoulders with rich people and learning how to make relationships. That you're not going to learn in secular subjects either. But in terms of the information and the development of the mind, the issue isn't that they're not learning Chochmas Chitzonius, is that they're not learning. And as a parent, if this is a concern of yours, and you want to keep your child in a Lubavitch Meisid, which is Altaras HaKodesh, because you embrace the Rebbe's philosophy and the Rebbe's values, teach your children that you value learning. And of course, there's only one way to do that, by learning yourself. Show your children how important that they do well, not just in first grade and in second grade, but in 9th grade, and in 10th grade, and in 8th grade, and in Beis HaMedrash. And if your child is going to yeshiva and he's wasting his time, do everything in your power to make whatever adaptations necessary, whether it's tutoring, or it's moving to a different school, or giving him bribes, that he should learn. If he will learn, and he will develop his mind, he'll have no trouble when he gets married going to law school. And I believe that that's what the Rebbe would want. If chas v'sholom, your children get married and they can't be involved in Kodesh, if the Rebbe had it his way, every Lubavitcher would be a shliach. He said that. if they use the yeshiva years even 50% as much as they could have, they'll do fine learning anything they want. And if they wasted their time in yeshiva, that's a different issue. And that's terrible. It's not allowed to be. And the blame that the school carries is the school's business, but the blame that the parents carry, you can do something about. You can make sure that your child knows what you want from them and impress upon them what you want them to do, create for them the right environment. That means choose the right school where they're going to learn. Use their minds, develop their minds, and they can learn anything.